He rides the e-bike with me, cracks jokes. And just because he's a guy from Ontario, like we have inside jokes. Like we can talk about the stupid local commercials on like Hockey Night in Canada that like no one else in our cycling sphere would understand.
Welcome to the Canadian Cycling Magazine podcast. I'm Matthew Pioro, and with me is Matt Hansen. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you for inviting me.
You know, you're ordered to be here, but thank you for showing up promptly to our recording.
Voluntold.
How you been, Matt?
Real super, Went out riding with one of your colleagues yesterday.
Your colleague, too. We work in the same place.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I guess it's our colleague. Yeah, forgot.
If it's who I think it is, I don't know. Both of you have got like monster gams going at the moment. How was the monster gam jam?
Well, it was actually the first time I've ever ridden with our Andre friend, and I have to say he's got a great pedal stroke. One thing I'll say. I hope he doesn't listen to this.
I think he might, but he dropped me like a bag of hammers a few weeks ago, so that was nice.
Oh, I'm not surprised. He's one of those guys that upper body doesn't move at all when he pedals, and all the power goes to his legs. So that's why I always notice these things, because I wiggle all over the place.
Go figure. You're fidgety, eh?
Yeah. Oh no, I just try and find any bit of energy I can.
I like how you're wiggling now and it's like affecting the sound. Good work.
Yeah, I forgot. This is radio.
On the podcast today, we have my in-depth conversation with Michael Woods, Tour de France stage winner.
Isn't it nice to say that? Isn't it nice to say that finally?
Well, we get into that when near the end. I don't want to spoil too much, but when we discuss his feelings, I think it matched a lot of our feelings where, he's been the great hope for it for a while. We know he's got the abilities, but yes, he's done it. He did it this past summer.
He can finally put it on his business card.
I'm sure he's got them rolling off the presses right now. But before my conversation with Mr. Woods, I want to look back at this busy August that was. It was Super Worlds, and I know it's been covered in great detail and it's starting to slip back, but there are still stories that are trickling out from that monster event because there was so much going on.
Let me tell you something. I'm not going to complain, but as a sports journalist, this Super Worlds is a lot. It's just like there's no breaks. And then all these damn Canadians who keep meddling, it's like, oh, another story. Can we just be mediocre? That's all I ask.
That's right. The lazy Canadian cycling journalist speaks. When our athletes do well, it's
a pain.
It requires some typing by you, Matt Hansen. Yes, it does.
Oh, world champion this, world champion that. I mean, boy, maybe if Isabella Holmgren can just stop winning, Mel Pemble can stop winning, just stop.
Nathan Clement, he just started winning. He got the men's T1 individual time trial. That's a para road medal. That's also gold. It was pretty darn busy for sure. And as I said, there are stories that are trickling out. On Isabella Holmgren, I don't think it's well known. During that junior cross-country women's race in which she won gold. This is her second world title of the year. We all remember that she won the junior women's cyclocross world championships back in February.
Another pain. Winning.
But
keep going.
But in Glentress Forest in Scotland, on the first lap, Isabella Holmgren actually crashed. And in what I've now decided is a theme at the World Championships, she broke her shoe.
No, that's actually more impressive. She broke it if I was going to break my shoe, I'd rather pull a Vanderpool and break it on the last lap because then you only have 15K or whatever, right? So
right.
Make that note, aspiring champions, break your shoe late.
So what she did is she was in touch with the pits, the coaches, longtime national mechanic or mountain bike mechanic supreme is Adam Trotter. He actually met Isabella Holmgren in the pits and applied some tape to the shoe. I'm not sure what brand of tape it was exactly, but the shoe got taped up and Isabella continued on with the race. Her strategy after that was to kind of take it easy in the technical parts. She didn't want to fall again. And she really hammered on the climbs and was offered a bit of recovery on the descents. So that was the race-winning strategy for Holmgren. And, of course, in the number 2 spot was Maren Lowe, Canada's under-23 national champion.
Great name for a mountain biker. How much better can you get for a name for a mountain biker?
It was fate. It was destiny.
Okay, name your kid Rocky. They're going to be a great mountain biker, too.
Rocky?
Yeah, like Rocky Mountain. It's a bicycle brand.
Yeah, it's either that or becoming a boxer.
Yeah, there.
Anyway, what struck you, Matt, from this Super Worlds?
I mean, like I said, it was a lot of stuff going on and you couldn't keep up at times, which is a good thing. It's not like I wasn't complaining, actually. One thing I thought was really interesting, I had a friend of mine who didn't watch a lot of paracycling up to that point. And, I wouldn't be surprised if there are a lot of people who had this experience. But because the para was riding along the elite stuff, people were kind of, I don't want to say forced, but they were able to watch both events. And he was completely blown away at, first of all, figuring out the various events, the various categories, and just completely inspired by some of the performances. So, I mean, I've heard a lot of people who said that because the para was run alongside the elites, like a lot of people watched it, and it gave them a lot of exposure. So I think that was kind of an interesting aspect.
It's funny your friend was saying that because I was wondering the same thing. I was wondering if Super Worlds gave some other disciplines a bit of a bump, sort of like we see at the Olympics. It's like you've got the Olympics on and you're like, oh, shot put, here's something I never watch.
I think actually that's exactly what it was like the Olympics. You're just watching sports, and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, you're so invested in shot put.
Because of this, this question was on my mind. I asked Mel Pemble, who defended her Omnium World Championship title. She was the Omnium champion in 2022 and has repeated this year. And actually, Omnium in the para category, she's a C3 rider, but Omnium is a bit head-spinning. I mean, a lot of these track disciplines have these funny little nuances, but in each Omnium event, there are riders who are part of the Omnium, and then there are riders who are, say, just competing in scratch or just competing in pursuit. So even though Mel might have finished 7th in one of these events, she was actually 3rd if you take the Omnium riders. Anyway, she accrued enough points, and it was a real nail-biter in the final scratch race because it had to be so specific. She had to be the first Omnium winner in the scratch. She didn't win the scratch. She was 2nd. But and then her nearest competitor had to finish 2 riders back from her. Anyway, a game of chess, as we always like to compare some of these cycling disciplines to. But Mel sent me her thoughts on the mix of para and able-bodied, and I want to read her words. I think the integration of para and able-bodied track was the best thing for paracycling and parasport as a whole, for offering a first-hand experience of watching what parasports is all about when people might not have ordinarily gone out of their way to watch it. Having a sellout crowd and seeing the crowd cheer just as loudly for us was amazing, and it really felt as though there was this huge education piece that was happening as people realized what we can do. Even watching my able-bodied teammates learn more and get more invested as the week of racing went on was super great to see. So I think as a whole, the Super Worlds has done wonders for the Paralympic movement, and I hope to see that momentum carry forward even to the major games. So there you go. And, for all the criticisms of Super Worlds, and there still may be more, there may be, people who have issues with certain parts of it. I think in that respect, it was a success. Now, on from Worlds, because we are going to preview the Grand Prix Cyclistes de Québec and de Montréal. The reason we're doing that now a bit in advance is, well, as people have noticed, our release throughout the summer has been a bit summary in terms of scheduling. And what's going to happen is the next episode we will release will be after those races with audio right from on the ground. So let us look ahead to the Canadian cycling tradition that is Quebec and Montreal that has been going since 2010 with, those pandemic blips that kept it offline. But it returned last year and it is back this September. Which one do you like better, Matt? Montreal or Quebec?
I mean, I think Quebec is a really cool course, and it's in old Quebec and it's beautiful. And I think it's actually for a cyclist, I think it's way more exciting, right? Because you've got like these little descents and these it's also really goddamn hard. But I think the Montreal is sort of a more interesting course just because you can have different kinds of riders. Always can be powerful riders, like a Wout van Aert kind of guy that can win. But I mean, they're both like incredible courses.
Yeah, for me, like Quebec City, where the route goes through, it's in the old city. It's beautiful. As a spectator, you have a much easier time, I would say, jumping between different points of the race in Quebec City. Montreal, it's sort of a bit more logistically challenged to get to different parts.
And so that's a long goddamn walk up that hill. I've never done it, but it's a long goddamn ride. So I'm sure it's a long hill.
But I find, and I don't want to be unkind to the Quebec City races because they're always thrilling, but they tend to follow that narrative of breakaway gets caught, and a lot, or more often than not, the key move comes in the last 3 kilometers. It's always very tactical. It's almost Milan-San Remo-esque, where you have to choose the exact right moment to go with the right people because it could all fall apart, especially going up the Grand Allée false flat there, which is a real leg sapper. However, in contrast, I feel like the Montreal races, they also, there's a breakaway and it tends to get caught in the closing laps. But I just remember some years where the closing laps are just a gong show. Peter Sagan, for example, won in a breakaway. Even the first edition, when Robert Hessing got away solo, that was just a crazy effort that he made. So I feel Montreal in the finale can be way more variable.
And you have a U-turn right before the finish, which is always fun.
I'm sure you love having all your momentum disappear and then have a false flat. Whatever that is, 500 meters, maybe a bit more. It's very cruel.
But yeah, I mean, who are you picking for Quebec?
You know who would be amazing, to be honest, to see win in Quebec? And it's his final year, and I don't know, Greg Van Avermaet. He's won in Montreal twice. Listen to these stats he has in Quebec City. 4 times second place, and that second place came, in one occasion, came 3 years in a row. 16, 17, 18, he was second place. And let's see, 2 times third place. So, man, Quebec is he's always done really well, but hasn't sealed the deal there. Montreal, of course, he won there in 2019 and 2016.
And of course, we have to make the joke about Matteo Jorgenson using a dropper post on that little descent after the Plains of Abraham, right? I mean, we have to. I mean, it's probably 300 meters long, but there's a couple little sharp corners there. So it might help.
So what you're saying is the dropper post he used to win Milan-San Remo, he should employ in Quebec City, because that'll make all the difference.
Yep. I remember it being very sharp, so maybe it'll help.
Back in the days when you were in Beauce, I'm sure it was sharper and steeper.
Well, the tectonic plates and such.
Now, as you mentioned, Matteo Jorgenson is on the start list for those races, at least the preliminary ones that I'm looking at. Also, I see Michał Kwiatkowski.
I was just going to say that so I could use my great Polish, but you beat me to it.
How do you say his last name?
Michał Kwiatkowski. Michał Kwiatkowski.
Jeszcze raz?
Tak. Well, I think between him and Ben Healy, that's both, well, maybe not Ben Healy so much, but Kwiatkowski for sure. I could see him just killing in Quebec. It looked like his kind of course.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, Ben Healy, he won that spectacular stage at the Giro. I wouldn't count him out at all. He is a very strong contender.
Matteo Jorgenson, I mean, that would be a hell of a, I could see, I mean, he can do anything now, it seems.
Yeah, as long as Michael Woods doesn't catch him. Oh,
Sorry.
we get into that in the interview with Woods, and actually it's super fascinating. No, he's super strong, and yeah, he could make the move. Biniam Girmay, he's a great option that I see on the start list. I don't see anybody listed from Jumbo-Visma, but, Wout van Aert, he could use a win, maybe.
He does love Montreal and Quebec. He did say how much he liked riding in Canada at one point, or at least in Montreal, probably Quebec too. He might come just for the bike pass, though, because he liked talking about the bike pass quite a bit.
And Pogačar, he won in Montreal last year, so he's not slated to ride the Vuelta. And as a Tadej Pogačar season, maybe he needs another win. Usually he's got a longer list of wins to his name, so we might see him.
No, I mean, I think it's going to be. I keep on thinking about your Greg Van Avermaet thing. That'd be cool for him to retire on a high note. I think that would be one of those nice little storybook endings we need.
For sure. On to Canadians. Historically, there is a Team Canada stocked with riders who can gain World Tour experience, and that may not necessarily be in the World Tour. And
for guys who ride the national team at these races, especially some of the guys on Who Empowered Health, which rumors are that team might be shuttering at the end of the year. The women's team sounds like it will keep going on, but there's a possibility the men's won't. So some of those guys, presuming they're on the national team, they're going to want to put in some good rides too. I mean, and that's the place to do it. September is kind of late to get a contract, but if they don't have anything yet, a little breakaway or some Mountains jersey or something might do something. So
that's very true. And usually it is the breakaway in which the national team sort of shines. Benjamin Perry of Human Powered Health was in the breakaway a few years ago, and he said afterwards that's where he's done some of the best, or at the time had done some of the best power numbers he'd ever done before. Nicholas Zukowski also has been in a breakaway I'm pretty sure it was in Montreal.
Well, I think it's almost like that. The same thing we always talk about the yellow jersey and all that stuff. I mean, of course, the national jersey, well, now it's not even blue, but the red and white national team jersey, you're wearing that on almost your home ground. Well, some of the Zukowski is his home province. You're going to be fueled the same way. You're riding amongst your countrymen and stuff like that. So you're going to give it. Plus, you want to get a contract.
Exactly. So it is great not only as, say, a development means to develop riders, it also inspires riders. Derek G has spoken about seeing the Montreal race as a young rider and just, loving it, which is a reason he is hoping to do it this year. He's spoken openly about that. He is not officially on the list, but if you look at the Maryland Cycling Classic start list, you will see Derek G, Hugo Hull, Michael Woods, and Guillaume Boivin. So, they're just down the road in Baltimore. To not see them all up in Quebec and Montreal would be a little weird.
I think you're probably right with that presumption. That Baltimore race sure is stacked now, eh?
Oh, totally. Another person who it would be great to see in Quebec would be Michael Leonard. He is the young rider on Ineos Grenadiers from Ontario. And, it's his first season on that World Tour team. He's at the Tour de l'Avenir right now with Riley Pickerel, who won stage 2 in a fantastic sprint. But Michael Leonard, it'd be great to, see him racing here in Canada with Ineos Grenadiers and, seeing what he could do.
I think it's just exciting for spectators and fans and cycling fans that we finally get to see all our guys we see on the roads of Europe back home. You'll be there in person and you get to see everyone up close and personal, and so will all of the folks on the side of the road. I think after a long season in Europe, there's probably nothing better than these Canadians to come home and finish off their year, riding on home ground.
Mm-hmm. And in that sense, the races have a dual function because, yes, there's the Canadian element, which is important. And then it also brings these World Tour pros that are usually just in Europe. And it's fantastic to see them here in North America. And I'm just wondering, though, it'll be interesting because, Usually, these races precede the Road World Championships, and this year they follow it. So I wonder what that does to sort of, a certain rider who would have been targeting these races as maybe prep races, maybe not A races to win. But what that'll do to the mix of who ends up showing up.
I mean, still lots of points to get, right? And it's still important races. So I think, I think there are guys that target these races because, you've read this before that Europeans, they do the same old thing, all the same races more or less. And I think coming to Canada, and I'm not just saying this from Canadian, I think it's a different race, and they're still not like, they're still legitimate pro races, and it's a change of venue. And I think some of them get pretty excited. Maybe they're even, after a little bit of break from the Worlds, it'll be, a month and a half afterwards, they start to refocus on this. And like I said, there's lots of points to be had, and it's an important couple of races. So
you're exactly right, especially on the points front. I don't remember the numbers exactly, but if you win one of these races, that's a lot more points than even winning a Tour de France stage.
And like we said, I mean, we've got these short, punchy climbs. They have that kind of European feel, some little bit of technical, some corners here and there. It's not just like some big open, American style kind of boring circuit. It's going to take a champ to win, and we always see that the best guys win. So
for sure. Now, I just mentioned a Tour de France stage. A Tour de France stage winner will be there, or is very likely to be there, and that's Michael Woods. I just want to add that he is maybe not my first pick for either of those races, but I feel in very specific circumstances, he might be able to win Montreal because he's shown that he can do very well, not just on a climb like the Puy de Dôme, which was the climb he won stage 9 of the Tour this year, but he's really good at getting over a climb and then getting ahead of the group before, say, a flatter finish. Now, in the case of Montreal, the climb up Camillien-Oude is kind of far away from the finish. So I think he would not only have to get up it super fast, but with a group that worked well enough to get to the line together, and he would still have to be faster than everyone else at the line, though. So I think that's my scenario for Mike Woods winning in Montreal.
Yeah, I think it would have to take a big lull because he'd have to do that little thing he does where he does a zillion watts on the steep part of the Montreal climb there, and then somehow hold him off all the way down there. And don't forget, there's that little thing on Polytechnique, which is a little sharp little bump, but it can also be a place where you can make a move if guys are looking at each other. So
very true, very true.
It'd be great to see a Canadian win this.
Oh, that'd be mind-blowing. Now, let us continue on the Michael Woods train. As I mentioned, my chat with him got very in-depth with stage 9 of the Tour. And he really knows how to analyze his own tactics and those of others. And I found that super fascinating. He always brings great insights to the racing. And also, I'm sure you felt this way as you watched that stage unfold. At first, you're like, oh, this is great for him. This is looking good. And then there was a point with about 5 kilometers to go that you're like, oh, well, Woodsy's not going to win. I guess I can get on with my day.
Yeah, maybe he'll get a third.
And he gets into how on the knife's edge things were for him, from no way can I win this, then maybe I can. So it's super interesting how that played out. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Michael Woods. Michael Woods, we are speaking not long after the Tour de France. How are your legs feeling?
My legs are actually really bad at the moment because I did my first trail run since in about a month, and they're pretty beat up. I have Grand Tour legs at the moment, which means I have great legs for riding a bike, but terrible legs for doing anything else.
What possessed you to do a trail run? I kind of know the answer. You have a history in running, but why did you take your Grand Tour legs out on a trail run?
Yeah, well, in years previous, I've actually even ran during, last tour, for example, I actually ran during the tour. And I try and run throughout the season. I think it's really good for your body. I think that as cyclists, we don't get nearly enough impact. We often have higher instances of osteoporosis, bone density issues, just because we're on the bike for so long, and the human body's not meant to be on a bike. We didn't evolve to be on a bike, but we did evolve to run. When you're not walking or running every day, your bone density does diminish. It's like astronauts, they're in space. They're not getting the same pressure on their bones, and it's the same, to a much lesser degree on the bike, you're just not getting it much impact. Like I've tallied it up over the years. If you do a Grand Tour and you follow the routine of a traditional professional cyclist, you end up walking cumulatively maybe no more than 5 kilometers in the course of a month, which, the average human should probably be walking that far every day. And so, I try and get impact work in. But this year, just the way the race played out, particularly the fact that I won on stage 9, normally I run on the rest day. I was so tired the next day just from emotionally that I wasn't able to get out the door. And then the next rest day, I was already starting to feel a bit under the weather, so I didn't run as well. I would have actually ran earlier this week, but I'm still coming out of being sick. And today was the first day where I felt healthy enough that it was time to run. And my legs were sore about halfway through the run and got progressively sore.
I find that interesting that the wisdom that you're working with puts traditional wisdom on its head. There's that old cliche of like, if you can stand, sit. If you can sit, lie down. That's what a cyclist should be doing, resting all the time. But I take your point, and it's one we bring up in the magazine with training. It's like, guys, you're kind of making bird bones at the moment. You gotta get some impact going on those bones.
Precisely. I think also what professional cyclists do should not be what the average person aspires to do in any way, shape, or form. We're not the picture of perfect health. To be the best Grand Tour rider is at odds with being a healthy human being. I realize that. So like I'm often like trying to balance being at my best performance capacity with also thinking long term and what's best for my long term health. Sometimes you do have to, like, for example, I eat a low residue diet for the majority of the tour, which means I'm neglecting eating a lot of vegetables, a lot of high fibrous foods, which is not good for my health. But I do it because it makes me lighter, easier on my gut, makes it easier to get carbohydrates in particularly. And so it makes me a better performer. And that, to that same degree, if you're standing, you should be sitting. If you're sitting, if you're sitting, you should be lying down. It's true in the sense that you are trying to recover as much as possible in a bike race. But when you start thinking along those lines over the course of a season, over the course of several races, over the course of the season, over the course of a career, that really does lead to serious issues down the road. And I have friends, colleagues that have since retired and really are struggling to find activity that they can do because they've followed that philosophy for too long. And so I'm trying to make sure that when I'm in the off season, I'm not beaten up if I go for just an easy jog. And then eventually when I do retire, I'm able to transition into, running particularly in an easy fashion, because although I love cycling is one of the worst things from an efficiency perspective. When you're a dad, it's far easier just to go for a run. So I will definitely, when I'm retired, I'll still ride and I'll still love to ride. But in order to stay fit, I think my bread and butter activity will be running.
Interesting. A return to running. I want to switch gears a bit and go back before the tour. And how would you describe your season before the end of June of 2023?
It was pretty solid. I had some pretty big obstacles to overcome over the course of the winter. Just some major family issues that left me not able to train as much as I wanted to or could have. And because of that, I got off to a bit of a slow start, but I felt like I kind of refound some of the form that I had in 2021, finishing 6th at the Vuelta a Catalunya, which is the best result I've ever had there, especially against the quality of field that was there. I think that was a really strong performance. I mean, I beat Jai Hindley and contending, not at the very finish with Remco or Roglic, but still there. And then the Ardennes were not my best performances, but I was pretty solid. I was fourth at Flèche Wallonne, but I actually gave it a crack. I went from the base of the climb and went for the win. But you take Pogačar out of the equation, that's a podium. And then
there needs to be a non-Pog podium.
Yeah, exactly. And Liège was a disappointment. I was really good, but just didn't position well. And the result, 12th there, didn't really necessarily reflect how strong it was. But it wasn't the worst season. It wasn't the worst and wasn't the best season, but it was pretty solid. I had a bad crash in Romney that put me out of the race, but otherwise, it wasn't too bad. And although I didn't get any big wins or big results that I wanted, it gave me a lot of confidence going into training camp here in Andorra and into June and July.
You also defended your win at La Route de l'Occitanie. How do you feel about that race, or where does that race sit in your sort of constellation of races that you've done?
Yeah, it was really just a result that I was really happy with, really proud of, and I think Occitanie is just a really cool area. I really like the area. It's not the biggest race in the World Tour calendar, but it's always a strong field. And I think it's one of the nicest ways to build into the Tour de France. Traditionally, a lot of guys use Tour de Suisse or the Dauphiné to prepare for the Tour de France. And I found that both are so hard, both physically and mentally, and also even just strenuous from a travel perspective. They're more challenging to get to, whereas Occitanie literally is the region's neighbors with Andorra. So the last day is only an hour drive back from the race. All those things contribute to, just when I've done those other races, I felt more fatigued going into the Tour, whereas I felt more invigorated doing Occitanie. And then, such a special region, no time trial typically, and just hard racing. All three things really benefit me. And so the fact that I've been able to win it twice now is really cool. And especially because it's close to home, my family's been able to come and be with me at the finish. And it's always nice to win, but it's especially nice to win when your family's around.
Speaking of regions that are close to home for you, there is the Basque Country. Now, before the tour started in that region, you spoke of looking forward to those two stages. It was in the Basque Country that you took your two Vuelta stage wins, one in 2018, one in 2020. This year, you didn't win either of those stages, but they put you fifth and then later seventh in the GC. How was the racing for you in the Basque Country?
Really good. Like you mentioned, the Basque Country is a region that really suits me. I really like racing there. And just the way the first two stages played, they really suited my skill set. Unfortunately, I was a bit too cautious on both days in the sense that I was very worried about crashing, something that's really plagued me in previous tours. And so positionally, I wasn't great on that first day and really was far back when both Yateses went away. And I really felt like I had the legs to be up there if I was better positioned, but I just was too afraid. But I was really happy with how I placed in the first day, particularly sprinted well, finished fifth on the day. And then even the next day, the way the next day played out, I felt like I climbed really well. I wasn't on the same level as Pogačar or Vingegaard, but I wasn't far back. And I felt like I was kind of one of the best of the rest in that group and still moved well positionally for the sprint and finished seventh, but ultimately Skermos was relegated. So I was pushed up to sixth. And my GC I was sitting, I think at sixth or seventh after those first 2 days in the tour, and really felt like I had a good crack the way the tour was going to play out at even a GC run.
And then how were the days leading up to stage 9?
A bit of a roller coaster. I was riding a bit of a high after those first 2 days, felt really confident, felt really good, especially having won in Occitanie before that. So I just felt like I was in a really good place mentally and physically, and then had 2 days of really easy racing. One of the easiest race days I've ever had in a bike race, period. It was by the numbers, the easiest day I've ever done. And then the next day was also quite easy. And I made a big mistake of not fueling adequately. I didn't fuel enough during those stages. And in the past, in my experiences with Grand Tours on a stage that easy, I've found that like limiting my fueling has benefited me long term. But I've never done a Grand Tour with this level of extreme, like polarization, where you had such hard racing, which was stage 1 and 2, and then such crazy easy racing 3 and 4, and then back into 2 of the hardest stages I've ever done in a Grand Tour. And so just that, like, it wasn't like I was starving myself, but, you know, just not topping up the glycogen stores properly, not feeling quite enough. If the stages were any easier, I probably would have been fine, but it bit me in the ass. And yeah, stage 5, I was okay. Didn't have a great day. I followed Pogačar and Vingegaard initially on the defining climb of the day, but then got dropped with about a K and a half to go, and then really hunger flatted and just came apart and finished in the second group about 20 seconds back, and then really, really paid the price for that underfueling the next day, because it was just what would be the theme for the rest of the race. Lotto Jumbo riding at 6 watts per kilo on every climb, and if you're not topped up properly and you underfuel at all, you just pay the price. And I came apart at a really innocuous moment in the race, and it ended my GC run on stage 6.
That is so interesting how the fuel, like the understanding of fueling, I feel has gotten better and better over the past, say, 5-6 years. And it's so interesting how the ability to track that stuff and to see the cause and effect of it is so interesting. And even having to train the body to be able to take in the fuel is part of the game.
Yeah, certainly. And it's also, in some ways, my experiences now, like now I'm a more experienced rider. This was my 10th Grand Tour. Some of my experiences have actually negatively impacted my performance in this race, just because the game has changed so significantly. How we fuel has changed so significantly that, like I mentioned with the fueling in years past, because the racing just never got to this level of extreme difficulty, of sustained effort. If you were to have such an easy day, which we had on stage 3, if you fueled too much, you'd end up being too heavy by the end of the race. But the race would never have a day where we were 5 watts per kilo for 2 hours at the start with descending involved and everything. That just didn't exist before. You know, you'd have maybe at most an hour of racing at the start for the breakaway to establish. And then there'd be, even on the hardest days, a sustained period where it was quite easy. And then there'd be a ramp up to the finish. Whereas this tour, because of the style that the tactic that Jumbo took, which was they realized Vingegaard is only really capable of beating Pogačar when the pace is just continuously hard. They made it so that every climb we did, we were doing 6 watts per kilo. And that meant that the files were just the biggest sustained files I've done in a Grand Tour. And so like my experiences in the past told me not to fuel for a situation like this. But this was such a unique situation, and it happened. And I paid the price for that.
Skipping then to stage 9, your team posted a video about the day of your win, and the plan in the team bus was that you and Guillaume Boivin would get in the break. How difficult was it to execute that part of the plan?
It was I don't want to say easy, because it was easy, but it was only easy because of experience. It was actually a very difficult breakaway to get into and very hard to do, but it was very easy at the same time because of experience. And also because this was a stage that especially once I was out of the GC, I really targeted. It went on at kilometer 0, and there was only one attack, and it was Victor Campenaerts going on the red car, like the lead car taking off, just getting the draft, and then whoever was able to somewhat get in his slipstream and hold on, was able to stay there, which was ended up being about 13 guys. And then we just drilled it. Once there was a bit of a gap, fortunately, Hugo Houle and Chris Nealons, my teammates, were also there kind of opening up the gap. A lot of other teams wanted to be in that breakaway. A lot of people knew that this was a breakaway that had a good shot at winning. But because we then proceeded to just ride super hard, no team was able to bring it back. Trek really tried at one point. They brought Mads Peterson, Jesper Stuyven to the front and just drilled it, trying to bring the gap back as quickly as possible. And then Skiermos did try and jump across, but the group that we were with was so strong and so on it and so cohesive that we were able to eventually break the peloton and stay away. But yeah, like I mentioned, it was easy in the sense of like, it was only one attack to follow. But that, again, came on the back of like years of experience and just knowing that, okay, this is probably what's going to happen. And then in order to make sure that I'm there for the K0 attack, it's not like you just show up, especially at the tour. Being on the front line for the first attack can be one of the most challenging things you can do in a bike race in the sense of positioning, because guys line up 10, 15 minutes before the start, knowing that's going to be a K0 attack. And then, especially if the neutral is long, this one wasn't super long. I think it was like 5K. You spend 5K literally fighting for that position and maintaining it, holding it. Guys are trying to push you out of the way or trying to come around you. And in years past, I wouldn't be able to get to that point and hold that position, but I just knew, okay, this is what's going to happen. I have to be there. I made sure that I was fighting in the right way and was on the right wheel when the K0 attack happened, and it played out perfectly.
And all this fighting is going on with that lead car, the red car, keeping you guys in check. And so it's not like it's a high speed and a lot of space. You're kind of going at a slower rollout and you're kind of bumping each other. Is that the case?
Yeah, to be honest, I actually enjoy that fight a lot more just because it's slower speed. The repercussions of crashing are far lower, but it is very physical and very tactical, even though it's like a quote unquote neutral. Everyone's jostling for, it's like a slow-mo field sprint. Everyone's jostling for position. The situation I hate the most, and this does happen in neutral occasionally, is if it's a downhill one. But even if it's not a neutral, where we're going over 60 kilometers an hour and everyone's still jostling for position, I really detest that, because I know the repercussions of crashing there are far higher. But typically in a neutral, you're not going as fast. You're going like 30, 40 kilometers an hour. And for me, I just feel a bit safer. I'm more comfortable with pushing guys around. But we did have one stage this year that was 11K neutral downhill, starting in Morzine. And I hated it because it was just, we were going so fast, but you still have to do that fight, that jostling, because I was trying to get in the break that day. And I just didn't have the cojones to be in the front.
So your breakaway group of 13, 14 riders worked well together and kept on trucking. And about 62 kilometers from the finish, your teammate, Guillaume Boivin, he rolled off the front. What was the thinking there? Was that a planned move, or did it sort of evolve organically?
Yeah, so the first half of the race was really well written amongst the group. Everyone knew that first we needed to break the peloton, and then we needed ideally 4 to 5 minutes on the peloton before we hit the base of the climb in order to hold off a fresher Pogačar and Vingegaard. So we really worked cohesively for that, and eventually got the advantage of well over 10 minutes. And finally, once we started kind of reaching into the finale of the race, like you mentioned, that 62K to go, that's when you could start. Although we were still working cohesively, you could feel the tension building and the realization that although we'd just spent the last 2.5, 3 hours working together, we were going to start smashing each other. And G kicked it off, not intentionally, but he was one of the bigger guys in the breakaway. And G is such an incredible rider, especially on false flat downhills. Like he's so good in that type of terrain. I've seen him do some stuff in other races. For example, there was a Giro stage in 2017 that was in Israel. It was the last stage in Israel, and I believe we averaged I averaged 70 kilometers an hour for the last 15 minutes of the race. And Guillaume held the peloton off solo until like the final 5K, I think it was. And it was just this false flat downhill, and G just was solo in the breakaway and just held the peloton at bay. And we found ourselves in the breakaway, like we found ourselves in a some position in the breakaway where he was just on the front and just pushing the pace a bit, and guys just couldn't hold his wheel, and he just kind of rolled away. And it was this weird moment because I actually didn't want the racing to kick off yet. I felt like the longer we went, the closer we got to the climb, the easier it would be for me to manage any gap that would occur, the better. So he rolled off, and although in some ways I was advantaged because all of a sudden I had a teammate up the road, in other ways you're like, oh no, this is putting the cat amongst the pigeons. This is what's going to get the racing started. And so I was of two minds when that happened. He didn't do it intentionally, but just happened organically. And I was like, okay, well, maybe he'll be able to roll away enough and gain enough advantage that he's just solo, and then I can just sit on guys. But the way it played out was Lutsenko of Stana was pretty quick to try and close it back. And then once he closed that back, it was game on.
Yeah, that's right. Guillaume was only away for about, I think, 4 kilometers. There's a rise in the road, and I think that kind of didn't play to his strengths.
Yeah, and he did well at that point too. We were also talking on the radio just to ride easy because we wanted to try to save him as much as possible. It wasn't like he didn't intend to be in the position that he was. He just was. Right.
But yeah, I was watching back the stage, and after that, it was game on. The cooperation started falling apart. There were tons of attacks. And then at about 48 kilometers to go, Matteo Jorgenson, the young U.S. rider on Movistar, he got away. And as we know, he stayed away. But at that point, did you know or did you think he was a danger?
Yeah, 100%. I actually got away with him and 2 other riders a touch earlier, and I thought this was the perfect move because it was the only teams that had more than one rider in the race were all represented in this move. Maybe it was 5 guys. I know there was Matteo, myself. We had a rider from Total. I think it may have been Pierre Latour or Borgado. I'm not sure. And we also had, I think Victor Campenarts was there as well. So it was just a nice group, and I thought that would stick, but somehow the way the group rode behind, they brought us back. And then at that point, everyone was super fatigued. And when Matteo went, I knew that could potentially be the race winning move. He went and so decisively, and I really wanted to follow, but I just wasn't in a position to follow. And after that, it was kind of everyone leaned on me. Yeah, I'm well aware of Matteo. Yeah, such a strong rider. He actually was with me when Hugo won the year previous. I sat on him in order to make sure that Hugo would stay away for the win. The way his season's gone this year too, like I really thought he had a good shot of holding off the group, just how strong he was. Then I was playing 2 games, one trying to keep the gap as small as possible to him, but also not help anybody else in the process. And everyone else knew that I was probably the worst guy to bring to the base of the climb with them. So no one wanted to collaborate. And it felt like in a lot of ways, the race started to slip away over the course of the next 40K.
It did seem like that because as everybody was watching it on television, you were in the 3rd group. There was one up ahead of you with Mate Mahorj and Nielsen Paulus. And if we're following the numbers strictly on the screen, that 3rd group at one point was 2 minutes and 18 back from Jorgenson. And I'm wondering if you were actually that far back, because on the TV coverage, you're sort of out of the picture. And then there is a shot of the group 2, and it's when Mahorj attacks. And I think Jorgenson is only 3 kilometers from the finish at that point. Mahorj attacks, and you're in the background. So I'm wondering if you were ever as far away from, or if you have any sense of how far away you were from Jorgenson, if it was 2 minutes and 18 seconds or anything.
Yeah, we were definitely 2:18 at one point. The car didn't want to, Steve and Rick my directors in the car didn't want to tell me how far back we were. but you knew like the way we were collaborating in the third group. I was trying to get as much cohesion as possible, guys to rotate through, but the pace that we were riding, we were just continuously losing time. And yeah, just visually looking up the road, you'd only see the other groups up the road if you're, on a stretch that was over 1.5 kilometers, 2 kilometers long, or if the road was really a steep incline. Particularly in the final about 6-7K to go, we were really losing time. And then I think what really managed to hold off the gap was we caught David Dela Cruz of Astana, and he then rode for Lutsenko from about 7 to 4K to go. And he pulled quite hard, and that kind of stopped the bleeding.
And then when did you make your attack and what to bring you in sight of Mohoric and Paulus and that group that was disintegrating?
Yeah, so I knew, and then also Steve and Rick knew that the final 4K were extremely hard. And the only thing I could do is just wait for those final 4K, because if I went earlier, then I'd be dragging guys with me. And if I went later, then it'd be too late. But the fact that it was 4K at such a significant grade, you could easily lose 2 to 3 minutes if you were really blown out to a guy that was really fresh. And for example, I don't remember the time that I did up the climb, but I know that I lost roughly 2 to 3, maybe even 4 minutes. I'd say three minutes to Pogacar on that final climb. And like I was going well. So it was a significantly steep climb. And so I just wasn't sure. And I was pretty positive that a win was out of the question once I got to the 4K mark to go. But I just knew that if I did my very best effort from 4K to go, I wouldn't be pulling anybody along, and I would make some big inroads on whoever was up the road.
After the stage, Jorgenson said he didn't have any race radio on the climb, and I'm not exactly sure where it cut out. Maybe it was on that last 4K, but did you have a good connection to your team car throughout the climb?
Yeah, I did. It was sweet because I had Steve in the car and he was urging me on. And it's interesting. Yeah, I'm not surprised that Matteo didn't have good radio. Yes, like cell phones in general just have killed radio technology. Radio technology is not that great. We're racing with radios that were just as good, 20, 30 years ago. So they're quite inconsistent. But I was lucky enough to have my radio be working that day and having Steve and Rick there because prior to 4K to go, I couldn't hear anything that they're saying anyways because there's just so much noise from the fans. But with the climb being shut off to fans, all of a sudden I could hear them crystal clear. And I could hear their excitement building as I started just picking off guys. And that was invigorating. And then also, yeah, just when I did actually catch Matteo and pass him, like you see videos of directors celebrating the car and you know how they're reacting and like how I was feeling. And you could just hear it over the radio when I got past them, like how pumped they were. And it was just really nice to just hear them on the radio as I was like finishing off the race.
Tell me about the bike you rode on that day. You were on the Factor Ostro, that's the company's aero bike, but the next day, interestingly enough, Factor released the O2 VAM, which is a bike with aerodynamics optimized for climbers, which I believe your teammate Simon Clark was riding. Did you opt for the more traditional aero bike instead of the one optimized for climbers? Did you have a choice in the matter?
Yeah, I opted for the more aerodynamic bike, the Ostro. I love the Ostro. I've been racing on it for 2 years now. In my mind, it's it's the best bike I've ever raced on. Like you hear guys say that when they're sponsored, but no, like that's the honest truth is that I've really enjoyed racing on this bike, and we've managed to get it super light. It's right on, especially without a power meter, we've got it down to 6.8 kilos with everything like all the transponders and everything on it. So it's at the weight limit. And the new O2 is, in my mind, as a consumer, it's a great bike because most consumers aren't limited to that 6.8 kilo weight limit. So you can conceivably get the new O2 to ridiculously low weights, closer to the 6 kilo mark. And because the average consumer is not traveling nearly as fast as we are, aerodynamics is less important. Although the O2 is super aero, it's not as aero as the Ostro. And especially this with me trying to be in the breakaway that day, but also even on most of the mountain stages that we've raced on this past tour, the speed has been so incredibly high that I will gladly use a bike that's over the weight limit if it's more aerodynamic. We're going on some of these categorized climbs 40 kilometers an hour. And we're just going so fast. And then especially on the flats, like we had one day this year where I was in Gruppetto and we averaged 46K an hour for the stage in Gruppetto, 49K an hour average for the lead group, and with significant climbing on the stage. So aerodynamics at the World Tour level, particularly at the Tour, because the hierarchy of speed goes, it's like the Tour is just even faster than is way faster than any other World Tour race. And then even the World Tour is just so fast, you need a bike that's aerodynamic. Once you start going below World Tour, once you start getting to point one, point pro races, that starts tipping a bit. You start like thinking more about weight as opposed to aerodynamics. And then every tier you drop down, because the guys in the front are just not pulling nearly as hard as they are at the highest level, and also that you don't have nearly as much sucked from the cars and the motos in front. Because like there's just so many vehicles in front of the peloton in the Tour, particularly, you're just going so much faster than any other riding environment.
You mentioned earlier how there are no crowds after a certain point. It was restricted how many people could go or how far people could go up the Puy de Dôme because it's a sensitive, delicate environment. And so you had quiet, you had silence. You were able to hear, as you mentioned, your radio a lot better, but did you like that quiet ride up to the top?
Yes and no. I didn't like it in the sense that it reminded me a lot of the COVID era of racing. Also, I'm quite an emotional racer. I respond really well to stimulus, and I love having lots of crowds. Like I draw a lot of energy from that. I get really motivated and excited by that. So not having that there was less exciting for sure. Also, I felt like it made even the finish less epic, because it's so sweet to have a bunch of people like in the photo with like fans cheering and all that kind of stuff. I think that's awesome. But at the same time, it did allow me to focus quite well. It did allow me to look up the road, because when you have that many fans, normally you can't see that far up the road. And I could see where Nielsen Palace and Borgado were quite quickly. And that was a really great carrot. And then when I got to them, I was able to see Mohoric, and that was another great carrot. And then, whereas I don't know if I would have got that visual stimulus had there been so many fans.
At 450 meters from the finish, you passed Jorgenson. Did you hear anything from him? A sigh or a grunt or anything?
No, I felt bad just because I knew how long he'd been out there. And like in some ways, we IPT beat up on him last year when Hugo won. So I just was like, oh, of all guys, it was him, especially because I really like Matteo. Actually, he's a sweet dude. We talk about skiing a lot together because he goes out to Idaho in the winters and skis there, and just a really nice guy, really, really good guy. And so it's easier to beat a guy you don't like, but obviously harder to beat a guy you really like. And I really like him. He's just a nice kid. Yeah, going by him, I didn't say anything. I just knew that when I got to him, I had to hit him pretty hard just to make sure that it would take any initiative out of him. And fortunately, he was pretty blown up when I attacked him.
I was thinking about this stage last year where you and Hugo were kind of working against him, and you had to draft on Matteo Jorgenson because Hugo was ahead, and that was the name of the game. So I was wondering if he's like, these friggin' Canadians, why don't they leave me alone?
Yeah, well, he did have a funny response the day I dropped out of GC on stage 6. I got dropped quite early. I eventually was caught by the Gruppetto on the final climb, and he was in the Gruppetto, and he came up to me and goes, "No, you're not supposed to be here. Don't be here." Because he knew that meant that I was going to be trying to get in the breakaways because that was his whole intention was to get in breakaways and try and win on the breakaways. And so he knew that it would complicate his job a bit more.
And I think I had a sense that you guys had a pretty good connection. I noticed on Instagram when he had to abandon the tour following a crash this year, you wished him well. So I figured you guys were competitors on the road, but not enemies off the road.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the case with most guys in the peloton. We race it's quite a competitive sport. It's a lot of fighting during the days and everything. But we all understand that we're all suffering as well, all training our asses off, spending months away from home and trying to be at the best of our games. And that shared experience does create a lot of camaraderie. I think Mohoric particularly had a great interview in the later stages of the tour after he won his stage, just talking about that. And yeah, there's a lot of, although we fight a lot of us get along quite well.
Michael Woods, on July 9th, you won a stage of the Tour de France. I was looking back at some of your old interviews with Canadian Cycling Magazine. One was from 2015, where you mused that maybe one day you could be a good World Tour domestique, if possible. This was when you were racing on a continental North American team. But a Tour stage win has been a goal of yours for a few years now. What is it like to finally achieve that goal?
Oh, it's satisfying. Actually, in many ways, a big relief. When I first started cycling, I thought that was kind of an outlandish goal. And I really didn't think that was possible. Like I mentioned in that quote, back in 2015, the goal was to be a good domestique at the World Tour level, just because I didn't know what I was capable of, but also I had a very limited runway and wasn't sure if I would be able to explore my abilities to their fullest just because I was older. But I was lucky to make it onto a team that did believe in me with the EF, and then super lucky to find my way onto this team with and be reunited with Sylvain and Paulo, two people that were in my corner even back in 2015 that were supporting me then. And in doing so, I had to really recalibrate my goals and set the bar higher, just because I achieved the goals that I initially set when I first started the sport quickly. My goal was when I first started was just to make the Olympics, was maybe to be a good domestique in the peloton. And I quickly showed that, I was actually capable of more of that. And so early in my World Tour career, I recalibrated those goals, reset them. And one of those was win a stage at the Tour. And then for years after, I was always talking about, win a stage of the Tour, win a stage of the Tour. And every year that passed, and having not accomplished that, I started feeling more pressure towards achieving that goal, and to finally do it now, in the latter stages of my career. It was a moment of joy, but also, of relief. I just felt relief when I finished that stage. Also because there was pressure on the team. We wanted to get a stage. The big goal express goal was to get a stage win. The Tour is the Tour. It's such a pressure cooker environment. All those things and contributed to that sense of, okay, I did it.
You just mentioned Paulo. That's Paulo Saldana and Sylvain Adams. Paulo is the performance director now at Israel Premier Tech, and Sylvain Adams is a team principal. As you mentioned, they've been helping you throughout your career for a while now. But I want to ask you about another Canadian who's on Israel Premier Tech, and he's also been part of your journey. He's from St. Catharines. Can you tell me about John Adams?
Disco. My man Disco.
Disco.
John Adams. Everyone calls him Disco. He is a crucial part of my... He's of the utmost importance in my performance, and he's my guy. He's my swan year from St. Catharines, from Ontario. Roughly similar age. He's a bit older than I am, but not that much older. He's been in the World Tour for several years. He actually started in professional cycling through Steve and Spider Tech, and was just working as a swan year on EF when I came on board. He'd been on there for longer, and we immediately connected. He immediately, we were always making sure that he was my swan year at the races. And since being with him at EF, he came across the IPT with me, and he's just been my guy on the road. We do all our training camps together. He comes over, and his wife and daughter are in St. Catharines, so He's on the road quite a bit. So when he's not at the races, he comes and crashes in my place in Andorra, go skiing together. He rides the e-bike with me, cracks jokes. And just because he's a guy from Ontario, like we have a very unique, we have inside jokes. Like we can talk about the stupid local commercials on like Hockey Night in Canada. Like no one else, no one else in our cycling sphere would understand. Like we have these just running jokes.
Even the Quebecers might not get those jokes.
Exactly. There's not many people from Ontario really, especially from our age group, that are in the cycling bubble. And so it's nice to have that like camaraderie, that connection, talking about just stupid stuff from two people who grew up in Ontario. Yeah, we get along famously. And yeah, he's just a great guy. He's such a hard worker. He makes my life way easier. And also he's so positive. The energy that he brings to the table, they call him Disco for a reason. Like he brings great energy to everything he does. And I love the guy. And yeah, he was obviously here at the tour with me, and first guy I give a hug to after I finished the race. And yeah, like even after, like he gives me a massage. We're just like on the table. We're both. It's as if he won too. Like he's played such a role in it. He's been on the road with me for not just my career, but this year particularly, and seen the highs and lows and supported me throughout. So that victory is just as much his.
To your point, I've seen John Adams enter a room at Israel Premier Tech at a team camp, and everybody kind of lights up a little bit. He does bring the positive, good vibes. He's good energy. I love the fact that he never wears sleeves, it seems. It's just his jam.
But don't let like the happy-go-lucky-ness fool you. Like he works super hard, and everyone, like he really understands the sport. He really understands. He's a true professional, and even being a swan year at the World Tour level is competitive, and it's hard, and he's one of the best at it. Like it's big days every day. Those guys worked some of the biggest hours of us all, and he is just always taking care of things, getting food ready, getting bottles prepared, getting rooms set up, everything. It's just full on, and he's never complains, always positive. It's amazing.
Michael Woods, you have had success on the bike this year, but off the bike, you've been busy. Tell me about M2M Cycling Coaching, which I think launched in May. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So Alex Cataford, former teammate of mine, he was on IPT last year, but also a teammate of mine when I started in the Conti ranks, Carnot, Quebecor. Recently retired, and we'd been keeping in touch, obviously, because we're good friends. I have a business that I run with my wife runs with my partner back in Canada, Dylan Wykes, who's finished top 20 in the marathon in the London Olympics. We started a running company called Mile Marathon, M2M, and it's blown up. It's been great. It's been a big success. We have regular practices throughout Canada. We have well over 500 clients and 30 coaches on board. And it's just been a really positive experience for us. We were really proud of it. It's done quite well. And our clients are consistently really happy with our business. And they feel like we've really grown this great community. It's just a great vibe. And talking to Alex, we started kind of playing with ideas as to how we could bring that atmosphere, that level of community to cycling, particularly in Canada, and give people access to really good coaching, just like we've done with M2M Run. And especially with Alex's experiences now, being a professional for 8 years, he's got his PhD in cycling. Yeah, he has such great insights. He's a really smart guy. He's super switched on, and he's so passionate about the sport. And he's far more knowledgeable in the sport than I am, just because he's come particularly from a track background too. Like the guys who come from the track background have such a better understanding of aerodynamics and positioning and just pedal smoothness and all those things. He's a guy that I've referenced throughout my career in terms of how to improve in the time trial particularly. And I've always respected the way he's looked at the sport. And so we both really felt a natural progression to growing M2M on the ride side would be having him lead it. And once he retired, we decided to start building on that and seeing where we could take it. And it's been really exciting. We launched it like you mentioned in May, and we're now even trying to get a couple more coaches on board with the goal of trying to build that level of community that we have with M2M Run on the ride side.
Well, this sounds good. And to be honest, I could use your help. You see, my colleague, Matt Hansen, is a beast on the bike, and his FTP is like 100 watts more than mine. If we lived in the Dolomites, this wouldn't be such a problem, but we're in flat Toronto here. So maybe you and Alex, 2 Ottawa boys, can help me, an Ottawa boy as well, out on this one, maybe?
Definitely. especially Alex. Like, I'm only taking 1 or 2 clients at the moment, just because, I'm still focused on riding. But this is definitely something we could take on. We could take on. Alex particularly would love it.
I have to ask then. Like you mentioned, you have only a few projects or clients at the moment. Will this become a full-time gig for you anytime soon?
Not in the next 2 years while I'm racing, but it's certainly a part of my retirement plan. I do want to continue to be involved in the sport. I love coaching. I loved it when I was coaching running, and I even did start coaching cyclists as I started transitioning into racing the bike. Yeah, it's something I really enjoy. And then to add to that, I'm living here in Europe, and I've had these wonderful experiences here in Europe. So doing some interesting and exciting camps in Andorra and in the Catalonia region is something that certainly a part of the future plans of M2M Ride, and stuff we want to, Alex and I particularly, because Alex is based in Girona at the moment, want to get into hosting and sharing our experiences, especially through a unique lens with Canadians, particularly because we're Canadians now here. So we're able to relate to a lot of people back home, but also show them some really cool things that they might not have seen, or give them some great riding experiences.
So you won't be a full-time M2M manager, coach anytime soon, like not in the next 2 years?
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, my big goal is still to race. I still have some big goals on the horizon, especially with this stage win at the Tour. I haven't won a stage at the Giro. I've come second at one, and I'd love to have the triple. I'd love to have a stage win there. So I'm really fired up for that over the next 2 years, and still some big goals I want to check off. I still haven't won a monument. I think it's increasingly more challenging than it's ever been now in the era that we're in with Pogačar, Remco, and these guys. It's even harder to win a monument, but I'm still going to try. And I've got a lot more to focus on still within the sport before I start branching out and getting back into the coaching world.
And what's ahead for you this season for the rest of 2023?
Big targets are Quebec and Montreal. I haven't been back to Canada since 2020 and haven't done those races since 2019. So I'm really excited to go back and do those. And then the Italian classics after. I'm still kind of getting over the high and the fatigue from the Tour. So it's hard to wrap my head around even just finishing off the season. But I think in a week or so, I'll be ready to get back on the bike and really push. And hopefully I can be really good for those races.
Right on. Well, Michael, thank you so much for your time. As always, I really appreciate your analysis and your deep dive into cycling. Good luck with the rest of the season. I hope I run into you in Quebec and Montreal. That would be cool.
That'd be great. Thanks for having me, Matthew.
And that's the episode. It is written and edited by me, Matthew Pioro. I had help from Matt Hansen. Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome.
I also had help from Terry McCall. This episode of the Canadian Cycling Magazine podcast is produced by Adam Killick. Matt, what else does Adam do?
He also does the music.
He does.
He does the music, everybody.
Also, thanks to Ontario Creates for its support. All right, Matt, I gotta relax a bit and then prepare for Quebec and Montreal. That's what I gotta do. I don't know what, you're busy, I guess.
Yeah, really busy. Yeah. Oh, man.
There we go. That's what I like to hear.
Holy smokes.
All right.
Gotta go.
Well, thanks again, Matt. Listeners, we'll see you after the races. Thanks for listening, everybody. Ride safely. I will talk to you later.